Good afternoon, and welcome to our Fall 2021 Redbird Educator Series. I'm Dr. Courtney Hatton, Assistant Professor of Elementary Literacy Education and member of the Borg Center for Reading and Literacy's Advisory Committee. Thank you for being here. We are excited to kick off the fall series with Dr. Anna Smith, whose presentation today is titled Toward More Humanizing Learning with Digital Technologies. Before I introduce Dr. Smith, I'll provide a quick outline for our hour together. We are set up in a traditional webinar style. Dr. Smith will provide a 40 to 45-minute presentation, during which we encourage you to use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen to post comments and to engage with each other around the ideas and strategies shared during the presentation. Following Dr. Smith's presentation, we will have a question and answer session. Please use the Q&A function on Zoom to pose your questions, which you are welcome to do throughout the presentation, as well as at the end. Now let's get started. We are thrilled to have with us today Dr. Anna Smith. Dr. Smith began teaching in 1997. She thanks and apologizes in some cases to the many young people from whom she has learned about learning and teaching firsthand over the years. While teaching high school, her students successfully nominated her to become the state's Reading Teacher of the Year, and her school was named a national point of light for the work done in a course she designed and a club she inherited, which engaged in community partnership service learning. She then taught middle school, and the youth at that time partnered with her in her portfolio for national board certification. She also became a literacy specialist for 30 high schools and middle schools and continued to teach a first-hour class so that she could partner with teachers to not only coach by observing others, but by having her colleagues observe her in the messiness of teaching. This experience of working side by side hundreds of teachers across disciplines and settings spurred new questions, which led to her current work as an educational researcher. Anna studies the literacies and mobilities of youth, educators, and researchers as they learn, teach, and inquire across contexts, time, and technologies. She is co-author of Developing Writers, Teaching and Learning in the Digital Age, and co-editor of the Handbook of Writing, Literacies, and Education in Digital Cultures. Anna is an award-winning educational researcher. Her chapters in 4 award-winning books. She has chapters in 4 award-winning books, and she and co-authors received the Arthur Appleby Award for the 2018 Research Study of the Year from the Literacy Research Association. Welcome, Dr. Smith.
Hey, thanks. Introductions are way too long as is, but I did want to add one other thing. So we're hosted here by Illinois State University, and Illinois State University was built on the lands and waters of multiple indigenous nations, some of which, due to erasure and historical inaccuracy, are no longer known to us. We do know that these lands and waters that we benefit from were home to the Illini, the Peoria, and the Miami. And then later, due to colonial encroachment and displacement, the Fox, the Potawatomi, the Sauk, the Shawnee, the Kickapoo nations, among others, who were forcibly removed. So beyond the simple acknowledgement that we give at this university, I'm still working honestly to find ways to make this matter more in the work that I do in education. Because as we know, whether it's the benefits from land grants in particular that our schools are built from, the residue of past events is right here with us. It's still with us today. The second thing I wanted to say is thank you for coming. Those of you who know me, and if you follow me on Twitter, I very loudly declared last year that you couldn't pay me to go to another webinar after this last year. So I don't know why I'm here. And so I certainly don't know why you're here. No, kidding. But so I'm guessing you have other screens open, you have other responsibilities right now, kids running around. So please go ahead to attend to those as well. But also, I can't stand the webinar situation. So please use the chat function. So as you look on your bar at the bottom, there should be both chat and Q&A. So if you want to do a question and answer that can be answered at the end, that's where the Q&A goes. If you click on chat, you can switch from panelist and host. That would just be seen by Courtney or I, and then, or me. And then if you want to switch to everyone, that will be seen by everyone. And so you can chat amongst yourselves. You can chat to me, and I would prefer that because I wish I could see you all. I hate not being able to see your reactions as we talk today. And so in fact, I want to start there. I know why I have been thinking about humanizing learning through digital technologies. I would love to hear why you have been, what brought you here today. What was it that interested you? So if you can, just click on that little chat button so that chat pops up for you. And if you wish, because let's talk about this for a minute. What brings you today to today's session? What interested you? And I'll give you a minute to think about it. I'll read some of these out for those who are watching this webinar later. So one person said, intrigued by the more humanizing idea and thinking of better ways through the profession to do that. Deanne, an old friend, thinking about the alienation of this last year that we all, many of us felt, if not all of us, that we felt through remote learning, remote life in many ways, and feeling a desperate need to connect. Yeah, remote learning. See a lot of the words remote, 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 remote. The pandemic that thrusts us into technology in new ways. Yeah. Like to see ways to help students connect more as a person, and not just putting information in front of it. You know, that's something we're going to talk about today. That is something that has been driving my thinking. Connecting as people, not connecting to information. Interested in the ways that younger students connect with and through technology and over technology. Connected to others around the world. You know, broaden their whole worldview too. I felt like I didn't get a chance to connect well with my students. How can we connect? Yeah. How to treat kids more like people than silent faces on the screen. Tech skills in K-5. Yep. What do we think about younger students and tech? Remote learning was not humanizing. How do we do this, right? And the pandemic is not over. Yes, let's say that nice and loud and clear. All right, let's go ahead and keep reading those. I'm going to come back and keep reading those as well. And please keep writing those if you haven't had a chance to finish. We can also share these. Please continue to connect here, and then we can also connect after today's session. I've put also my social media up here. And if you want to share out during today's session, we use in the School of Teaching and Learning Redbirds often, because we're the Redbirds, and then the College of Education are the Edwards. See what we did there. And then Humanizing EdTech. So here's what I've been thinking about a lot. And this connects, at least it resonated for me with what many of you were talking about. That learning is about people and connection and relationships, and not isolated facts, not information, not about concepts, but at least for the last, however, 25 plus years that I've been in education, we have been on this steady climb of increased mechanisms of control, of compliance, of this hyper focus on metrics and best quote unquote practices that can be replicated, and fidelity, right? Student performance has been narrowed to this one band of evidence and then narrowed again so that we can measure and control and replicate. And our work as teachers, I've seen it scripted and surveilled to a degree I did not think was possible when I entered our profession. It's like we're trying to human-proof the classroom. And this image, if you're familiar with it, if it seems like you've seen it somewhere before, it's from when the Common Core state standards was first marketed to us. It was marketed as a way to ensure equitable learning across the states. And it imposed this idea that we're going to take all of knowledge and standardize it into this progression across the grade levels and ensure that every child, right, was going to hit every stage of this knowledge. It was a series of steps from one grade level to the next. And it was going to be this efficient mastery of skills, check it off. It promised at the same time that learning was linear and hierarchical, and it had predetermined endpoints and a predictable trajectory. But this conceptualization of development, it limits the scope of learning as this discrete set of quantifiable actions, no matter what was being learned, right? It had to fit in this quantifiable actions, and it left little room for variation across individuals or contexts, or whether there was a pandemic on, right? It assumed that all students should learn the same things in the same order at the same age. And there's security in this, and I have used this language and I have bought into it at times. But there's also problems with this. For one, who decides on the staircase? Which pieces of knowledge get to be quantified out of all the knowledge of the world that's developing rapidly, if we're thinking about technologies, right? Which little bits of knowledge get picked out of the huge range of knowledge that could be? You know, we're 21 years into the 21st century, right? So a colleague of mine just looked at the digital, where was digital writing in the Common Core state standards? Now that we're 21 years in the 21st century, and we've had all this emphasis on, we've got to have these young people ready for the 21st century, now that we're 21 years into it. And we've seen this necessity of being able to compose at a distance right now. The term digital is in the writing standards 44 times. 40 of those times is in the phrase print and digital text. So it's not about digital anything. It's just paired with print. So it's like read, print, and digital text. So nothing about actually learning how to navigate digital text, how to decipher between fake news, right? And authentic news, anything around digital text, how to locate it, how to create it, compose it, nothing, just print and digital text, 40 of the times. There's only 4 other instances where digital is used. And most of the times that digital is in the text was in the marginal notes and in the introduction, not in the actual standards themselves. The word multimedia and the word technology are only one other, each of those appears once. So there's one standard that uses technology in the writing standards, and multimedia is in the presentation standards. It's not actually in the writing standards, it's in the presentation standards. So multimedia is in the presentation standards. In K through 4th grade, media is supposed to be added to presentations, like you add drawings and visual displays. and it's supposed to be added as desired when appropriate, whatever that means, right? So grades 1 to 2, it's supposed to be added to clarify, and grade 3 to emphasize, grade 4 to enhance main ideas, grade 5 to 7th is supposed to be include multimedia. I don't know the difference between add or include, but there's your great staircase, the difference between K through 4 and 5 through 7. Grade 8, want to know the difference? You're supposed to integrate into your presentation. There's your great climb. So who gets to decide this great staircase that we're climbing? Anyway, I could go on. It's not worth our time. The point here is, nowhere are they creating multimedia. They're adding, including, integrating, and sometimes strategically using it. But nowhere are they composing digital multimedia in the standards. Where technologies are used is in one standard. It's pretty promising. It's Writing Anchor Standard 6. Sounds great. However, this phrase right here is repeated in K through 4th grade. The only difference is it changes from digital tools to technology with internet. That's the difference between K through 4th. So all of you who are looking for younger grades, direction and guidance and what should we be doing from K through 4th grade, there's your guidance. Move from digital tools to technology with internet. Does that help you? No. What's the difference? There isn't any. It's a change of words. The only other difference in this writing standard between those grades is the length that the students are supposed to type words on paper. Or, not paper, but keyboarding. So essentially it's keyboarding in this standard. So they go from 1 page, I think it's in 3rd grade, to 3 pages by 5th grade. And then 5 through, and then from 6th through 12th grade, the main difference is that there's a focus on citing sources. And in 7th grade, you actually have a double dose of needing to cite sources in this particular standard sequence. So talk about a flattened sense of what knowledge is. That out of all the things that we could be focusing on in writing and composing and digital composing, this is what we're supposed to be doing in 7th grade. A double dose of linking to and citing sources. That's it. But something more important is happening here. For one, this kind of a trajectory implies something and conflates this organization of knowledge and this flattened sense of what knowledge is with learning and what learning is. And so here's another visual from the media that was supposed to help make us want to do the Common Core. That learning is something that's done to us, that we're lifted up from our early years of 2 + 2, and I don't know, shoved and pushed and dropped to 2 × 2. I would be huddling too by the time I'm dropped there. It also implies things about learners. So if a learner is not at the same pace as anyone else, then they're at a deficit. And in fact, all youth are at a perpetual deficit because they're not at the top of the staircase. So if all knowledge is a staircase, right, that students are constantly at a deficit. So this kind of a metaphor for what learning is dehumanizing. is putting all students constantly at a deficit. And it feeds into, and it is fed by existing deficit scripts and existing stereotypes about who can and who cannot, about our existing achievement, quote unquote, gaps, and our discipline disparities that we have that run down hard gender and race lines, with Black and Latinx youth and their families and emergent bilingual and disabled youth experiencing the most exacerbated deficit framings that we have in our educational complex. It also does something for teachers. It also is dehumanizing for teachers. It makes teachers the great measurers, that's the thing we're supposed to do. And we're depicted as, we don't know what to do with these darn kids that aren't measuring up, to constantly being behind. Dr. Mike Rose recently passed away in the last 2 weeks. He's a great thinker. I highly recommend his work. He talks about this particular type of thinking that we've been doing and this dominant vocabulary about schooling that has taken over. He says that he worries about that it limits our shared respect for the extraordinary nature of thinking and learning. And if we take just a moment and think about the last time you learned something and had that aha moment, it is extraordinary. And it lessens our sense of social obligation. If we take on this dominant vocabulary, it becomes possible for us to affirm that the most meaningful evidence of learning is a score on a standardized test. Or it allows us to reframe the public good in favor for fierce and unequal competition. Education is reduced to a cognitive horse race. What's he talking about here? This kind of framing comes with this buy-in that tells us that our world is literally a race to an economic goal of making money. And it literally was framed in this kind of xenophobic way that, in Shanghai, they're learning a whole lot more and they're making a whole lot more money. So we got to catch up in this race. In such a world, in such a worldview, this fear-mongering kind of worldview, when the pandemic hit, we ended up with this big stoking of fear of learning loss, right? Whoa, we gotta crank up the conveyor belt of this staircase because everything that we've lost. And I love this piece. I'm going to share with you all this PowerPoint when we get done, or this slide deck when we get done. So don't worry, all these links at the bottom you're going to be able to get at the end here. By Maxine McKinney-Royston and Dr. Shreen Vasoji, that they say that in thinking about, what we'll lose if all we focus on is really learning loss, that we must not seek to reestablish what was normal, right? Let's not go back to the staircase. Why? Or try to crank up the staircase. That normal education flattened learning to individual achievement and competition, and teaching to accountability. And right, like we were just talking about, that normal education ignored the deep disconnects between academic learning, well-being, and the realities of social and political life. And we really felt that disconnect during the pandemic. I'm with you, all of your comments. That deep disconnect was really felt. Academic learning, well-being, and the realities of social and political life. I also saw glimmers during the pandemic. I heard over and over and over from educators, young people, families, that we found ways, using technologies often, to make those connections, whether it was academic learning to the realities of social life, or well-being to academic learning, social connection in some instances. So for instance, so many teachers started using Google Jamboard, right? Discovered it. And it wasn't just that they used Google Jamboard, but morning meetings, it moved on to Google Jamboard. And it wasn't just morning meetings moved on to Google Jamboard, but Google Jamboard allowed morning meetings to evolve a little bit, that it wasn't just students in a circle time, saying how they're doing around in a circle, but allowed all students to, sometimes anonymously, sometimes their names were attached to it because the way Google Classroom was set up, but to simultaneously share how they're feeling. So they weren't necessarily influencing each other, or to share not just in words, but in images and words. So the modes that they were able to communicate in and shifted. And so teachers were feeling connection in a new way that they hadn't been able to feel before. So here's a moment. No, it's not a solution, right? And yes, the screens were still blank in many cases, but a moment of connection in the middle of a disconnect. So much so that teachers, these same teachers are saying, how can I take that element and bring it into what I'm doing right now in my teaching, in my morning meetings that are masked, right? And we're in a circle, but I actually want to do some hybrid teaching, not the hybrid simultaneous teaching that we called it last year, but where we're face-to-face, but we're also using digital technologies in the classroom so that I can still do some of these connections that way. So what I wanted to do right now is have us do kind of a simultaneous hybrid thing in our middle of our webinar. Have you think about some of these on-the-fly solutions you found during the middle of the pandemic. They could have been ones for you, for your family, for your classroom, right? Any of these combinations. They could have been ones that your students found that they told you about, right? That may have made any of these connections. A connection for academic learning, a connection for well-being, a connection to realities of social and political life. And what I'd like us to do is really do a crowdsourcing of these ideas of what do we know, what do we already know. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to send you to something that's called a Padlet. And on this Padlet, there's a little bit of a directions up here if you need them after I send you here. And Courtney sent you to a link, so you can go right here if you want to, and already head there. On this Padlet, we're going to be able to connect with where you are in the world. And you don't have to put the exact location where you are. You can kind of do a general regional connection of where you are. And then I'd like you to write a note about a lesson that you learned in the last year and a half, about a strategy, a tool, an approach, some idea that an idea that you found, you're going to carry forward with you. And make sure to describe how or when you're going to use this strategy, tool, or approach so you can contextualize it for others. And then feel free to add your name or a social media contact if you want to connect with others in the future. And this is going to be public in the future, so only include the information that you want to publicly share. So let me show you how this works. You click on the plus sign. You can say regionally. I'm not in Chicago, but that's regional. And then you can just write something, or you can add some multimedia too. So you could search for an image. You could link to, so if let's say it's an app, maybe it is Google Jamboard. So you want to link to Google Jamboard itself. You could also click in here if you wanted to record your video of you explaining what you did. You could record that. And you can also link to a YouTube video and search for it right here in Padlet. So if you've never used Padlet, the reason why I want to share this with you, it's not always a map, but it's an interactive whiteboard that your students don't have to log into and is multimedia. And so it allows you to do this sort of multimedia pin dropping or logging of different ideas. So go ahead and go right there to that link, and let's share some of the strategies that we figured out. And these they could be particular tools you used. They could be, a strategy could be something simple as, I wrote an away message on my email, right, for nighttime, and I turned it off. That's a strategy. That's a coping strategy. It's a well-being strategy. I stopped checking messages at a certain time. There's a strategy. So let's start going ahead and populating some strategies that you found. While we do that, I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic and my video so we can watch these pop up, but I'm still here. I love these. You keep popping these up in there and adding these. I'm just noticing the time, and I always take longer than I think I'm going to. So please keep adding these. And I'm going to jump to the next slide as you add these. And this is going to stay open, so you can come back and see what people have added. And you can also continue to add more ideas as they come to you, because this sort of crowdsourcing of ideas is really what it's all about. This is more ideas than I would have given you tonight already, just from the 2 minutes that we opened this up for you tonight. Oh, let me pop over to New York real quick. Love it. Simplicity. All right, so we already know some great strategies, and I appreciate, there's ideas that I'm already going to take in. And each of these, what I loved about each of these, whether it was grace, simplicity, each of these were those combinations, right, of well-being and academic learning, right? And that combination in particular has been repeated over and over again as we head into a continued pandemic. And I think that's something that we really do need to pay attention to. And so these ideas that we're collecting here really are not ideas that we're just going to go take and grab and go, right? It's not best practices. This is not, that Padlet is not a list of best practices. Instead, it's going to do the work that we always do as creative, critical educators. We're going to continue to adapt to each new context. Dr. Maria del Carmen Salazar has done a wonderful job of reviewing research on humanizing pedagogies. And if you want to learn more about humanizing pedagogies and what that means, I highly recommend her review of research and education article on this. She talks about this process of looking for, the quick fixes, the best practices, really strips teachers and students of their individuality and devalues and dehumanizes us all in the process. And so she talks about that Paulo Freire's ideas were really to, And it goes back to what we know about education, that educators need to listen to their students, build on their knowledge and experiences. This goes back to also Gloria Ladson-Billings' culturally relevant pedagogies, goes back to Moll's funds of and colleagues' funds of knowledge, right? In order to engage contextualized, dynamic, and personalized education. And it's when we do that that we really can be furthering the goals of humanization and also social transformation. So we can be working towards that greater public good at the same time. So what does that mean? And let me go back to this idea that I don't know your students in your classroom, right? Every year, every class, we're going to have to get to know, in terms of the technology use that they have, their knowledge and their experiences. So I was trying to figure out, okay, so how do we then start to think about what might we start with young people? So I'm going to start with some general things about what we know about youth right now, but this isn't where we're going to end, because this this is just some general trends. We want to actually think about the particular young people you know, because the general trends I'm going to talk about right now, you could tell me about a handful of students that these don't apply to. That's the point, right? That every group of young people are different. So young people right now, this was a Pew report from 2018. Their 2021 report, they only have the adult report out right now. The teen one is coming out soon. So of course, tons of things change when it comes to technologies and teens in just 2018 to 2021. So bear with us. Almost ubiquitous use or device use, and most teens have a smartphone. Not so much the case that they have a desktop or a laptop computer at home. We knew this going into the pandemic. We know this much more so coming out, the realities of this. If it is in the home, though, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have access to it, even if there is one in the home. However, a smartphone, they typically have it themselves and they have access to it. This then gets at one of the myths about young people, that, hey, they've been around digital technologies, they should know how to use it. Typically, the kinds of devices and how we expect them to use those devices in schools is radically different than the kinds of devices and how they use those devices in their lives, right? Device use and how they use devices is not a neutral thing. They're used to mobile devices, and they use those mobile devices for very different purposes, right? So the platforms that young people use them for overwhelmingly are YouTube, and in 2018 it was Instagram and Snapchat. Snapchat's gone, TikTok has taken over, right? So now it's YouTube, TikTok, and then Instagram. And Instagram just announced that they're no longer a visual platform, they're a video platform. So it's video, 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 right? Video, video, video. We want them to write in Word documents, save those Word documents in folders. Very different logics, right? So our ways of working and our practices of working, we can't assume that it's not the same logics. It's videos, and it's social sharing of videos, and it's remixing of videos, and this layering of different modes. That's how youth are typically using their devices, and they're using them in mobile ways. Youth are also thinking about their well-being. They're pretty much statistically split in thirds around whether they're having their digital technology use is having a positive impact on their life, no impact, or not, neither positive or negative, or negative impact. And the positive impact is around connecting and finding news and meeting others with common interests, which is also connecting. And the negative impact is bullying and harming of relationships. So also about connecting, and unrealistic views of others' lives. So also about connecting in relationships. So if we're thinking about what do we want to be thinking about in terms of our use, if we're thinking about social emotional learning, which I know is a huge emphasis in our schools, so much of that focus is on decontextualized strategies to feel better, or right, not a contextualized sense of ethics of engagement with others necessarily. So where's our ethics conversations about engagement with others? That would be a great move forward in terms of helping our youth navigate this landscape. How are youth learning? In studying how youth learn with their mobile video engagement, they're hanging out, they're messing around, and they're geeking out. And if you have an 8-year-old, I have one word for you: Minecraft. And now you'll know what hanging out, messing around, and geeking out means, right? This is how they're learning. They're not learning by taking a tutorial or reading the directions or waiting until someone tells them how to do it. They're diving in, they're tinkering, they're checking things out, they're watching somebody else, they're watching the YouTube video of somebody else doing it, or they're watching the video game. Oh, what are those called? My nephew actually makes those, where they watch the other people play video games. Somebody come on in the chat, you know what they're called, right? So they're hanging out, they're messing around. Yes, they are on Twitch. Yes. Streaming. Yes, thank you. Streaming or streamer. Yes. So they're streaming their video gaming and they're watching that, and then they're messing around with whatever the tool, and they're geeking out. So what would it be like if our school classrooms also had these modes of learning? Right? It also, I'm not talking about replacing. I'm talking about enhancing our learning modes with mobile learning, with video learning, and engagement, and enhancing that, and that we also allow space and time for hanging out, messing around, geeking out. There's also a link to this in our space. Now, I had hoped to give you some time to hang out, or at least mess around or try out some of these video platforms. I'm watching the time. We really only have about 5 minutes before we get to question answer time. So we don't have a lot of time for tonight. Time always gets away from me, but I'm going to give you 3 platforms that go from, I think, the most user-friendly to the more complicated to the least user-friendly, or the most, it's not user-friendly. It's still, Lumen 5 is still user-friendly, but it's a little more sophisticated and a little less controlled in terms of what media pops up. I wouldn't use this one unless I were with high school students, the Lumen 5. And in term, all the 3 of these have free accounts. And all 3 of these are video creation tools. So if we wanted to start with some video creation, if you haven't already used video creation with your students, and I had a prompt for you that I thought maybe we could try out a little bit today, but we can't, we don't have time, but you could do this afterwards, after today's session. You could create a video found poem from today's, either the quotes from the presentation or thoughts that you have from tonight, with the goal of sharing it with someone else in your life in order to connect with them. In other words, can you take on what young people are doing? They're creating videos that they're sending out to share with someone and connect with someone in their lives, right? So can you try that out? Can you hang out, mess around, geek out with a video creation tool to share with somebody and connect with somebody in your life? So Adobe Spark is one platform if you haven't already used it. It has Adobe Spark is a free online version. You can create media cards, a website, or videos with it. And the video tool, I'm just going to show these to you. It actually says slideshow and then a video underneath it. And I'm just going to put, let's say it's about bananas, so it can load up here. What it does is it allows you to start with, let's say I want to teach a lesson, and it gives you a framework to start with that. And pull up here. This is, I would say, the most user-friendly. I have seen grades 1 and 2 use this platform to create videos. Videos, for instance, about class was doing some beach combing for litter, and then was creating videos about why we don't litter, how we have to take care of our earth, and that sort of videos that way to connect with social realities. So on this, what you can do is you can upload video, you can create text, right? So you can type welcome, right? You can go to your next slide. You can do the same thing. You can add a photo. What's beautiful over here is that everything you do then here on the side is that you can look for free photos. You can just search here for copyrighted or copyright-free photos that you can then just insert. Also over here on the side is where you can do your layout, theme, resize, and music. So again, very user-friendly. Then you finish, you hit go. The free version has a little logo, and that's the only thing that's on the free version that's different. Canva for Education, this came out this last year. They do the same thing in terms of Canva Education. You click create your video. It's very much similar. It just has a few more options for you. I'm gonna go ahead and click try. With Canva Education, what's nice about this as well, is the same thing with Adobe, but if you have the paid version, you have to do the paid version to do this. With Adobe Education, you can actually collaborate on these videos. So I've had my students collaborate on the videos and create, take a quote from class and create a video together in the Adobe Education video, like as a response to something. So in this, it works the same way, right? You can click a theme, then you do your text, your options are over on the left instead of the right, and then you can create a video that way. Lumen 5, you click new video here. The way this is different is you click new video, then it asks you for text. Then it uses AI to take your text. I'm going to go back one screen so you can see what we created in this class. And then it auto-generates images and music that it thinks goes with that text. So it's kind of an interesting use of current technologies to do that. My students, for instance, in an education class, created this little video that you're seeing here about our commitments to our future students. These were my undergraduate students by doing that. So I just wanted to show you some, again, very user-friendly video tools that you could use, try out, tinker, play with, and think about as one possible way to, if we're going to go back, let's go back to this idea to listen to our students, build on their knowledge, build on their experiences, build on what they're doing with digital technologies, and create a dynamic and a personalized, contextualized learning experience that connects their well-being, their academic learning, and our social and political realities of our world. Last thing, because I love to get pushed myself. This was an article I was reading just right before our presentation. Long list of authors there at the bottom for you. And I was thinking about, am I using digital technologies in a way that allows youth to make use of their multiple linguistic repertoires, wrestle with intellectually complex problems, engage in culturally sustaining learning, strengthen their agency now and in the future? All right. Ideas and questions. And let's stay connected. You can drop them here now. Both ideas you can put in the chat, or questions you can drop in the Q&A, and we can take those up in the Q&A space.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith, and I can help navigate questions as well. And I put your presentation in the chat for everyone to be able to see later. But yeah, any questions, you can go ahead and either put them in the chat or in the Q&A function. Didn't mean to go away.
or ideas too. So if you have an idea that's bubbling up, or another video app or any of those, go ahead and share those too. I wish Zoom had the little ... like our phones do, so we knew if and when people were were typing away. You bet, Leslie. Thank you for coming. Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Kathleen. So SOPA is a new policy within Illinois. There's a question that was asked about Illinois. So Illinois has a new policy that is around which technologies offer a certain level of privacy for students, which is a very important topic. And as I was planning this, there were so many topics I was navigating between what do I talk about and what am I not going to be able to get to. Surveillance, privacy, all of these were very important topics. So SOPA only covers software applications that have agreed to certain stipulations that Illinois and certain school districts have set out. And so there's a list that your school districts have. And if it's not on that list, you're going to have to get that list from your particular school district. That's where your district or your whatever governs your school body has agreed to. That's where you have to go to find out what that list is. Every particular body has a different list. We're under the same regulation at Illinois State University, and a lot of professors are going to have a really hard lesson to learn really soon for that same reason, and they're not aware even. So it's a great question. I don't know the answer for you because I don't know what list you have. Yeah, Jenna, Adobe Spark for animal reports. That's perfect. And what's great about the Adobe Spark is it really functions like a PowerPoint would, but then suddenly it's animated. So it's as simple as designing, if you're really used to designing slide decks, PowerPoints, like we have been for years, all you're doing is just moving that same kind of logic that we're used to as teachers from slide decks to these videos. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we do have a couple of other questions. So one question is, are all the platforms free and can they be used with Chromebook?
That's a good question on Chromebooks. I don't know if your Chromebooks have to have particular apps. That is a good question. They're all free. I do know that. I don't know if they all can be used in the browser. So I think so, because they're all in my Chrome browser right now. So I think so, but they may need to be able to be downloaded as Chrome apps. That is different on a Chromebook. I can look into that. If you are on social media, you can tweet me and I can look into that question and get back to you.
And then I don't know if you see that last question. I'll just read it for those who can't see it. As you mentioned, most students get their learning outside of school by jumping into things, watching videos, etc. When introducing these technologies in class, do you recommend having them jump in and teach themselves, or do you recommend giving them specific instructions or a mix of both depending on age or skill level?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of, I'm trying to think of, the name is lost. I mean, some of you might know the name of it. There's a great news app. Somebody help me with this. That is kind of a contained reading media kind of news. Yes, thank you, Deanne. Newsly, yes, Jessica, right. I knew you all would know it. Yes, yes. News ELA or Newsia. Yeah, one of those two. I think it's ELA. What students can do within that is search within that, and that's kind of a contained space to do some initial search for now. So then your students aren't necessarily on the open web, just searching anything, but they have a kind of, so if your students are on the younger end, that gives them a more contained space to search. Another way to structure a search is to give them different ways of searching. So if your students are maybe older middle school, high school, and you could have them search in particular ways. So it could be, in week 1, they're asking older generations like grandparents, parents, neighbors, right? Like they're searching in particular ways, and then they're searching on social media, and then they're searching on, so they have a particular search mechanism that is a little more guided. And you can also have a class, you can have a class account that has, that you manage, that they send their questions out through. So that they aren't the ones on social media, for instance, or something like that, but your class is. And then that sort of thing is another way of guiding, and then also managing the potential, open issues of the open web. Something that I think was really helpful advice that I received goes back to students' privacy, is that the internet that your students are seeing, or anyone is seeing, is not the internet you're seeing. So what's being fed to you is being fed by a number of algorithms that are reading your gender, your race, what it thinks your religion is, what it thinks your mental health status is, what it thinks your everything is, your economic status is. And so what any one other person is being fed is going to be radically different than what you're being fed. So any site, not just social media sites, every site is now being run by algorithms. Search engines, any site is run by that information that's being collected. So the internet you see is not the internet anyone else is seeing. And particularly people of color, women of color are seeing the most abuse and seeing the most harassment. And this goes to young people. So that is something to think about in your thinking about, am I going to have my students go search something or put themselves out there on the web? And so thinking about, again, class accounts or other ways of mitigating that potential harm is very important to think about.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. I just have a couple of closing remarks. We thank Dr. Smith and thank the participants for joining us today. We are interested in your feedback about the session and your ideas about topics for future webinars. So tomorrow you will receive a follow-up email that will include a link to a short survey. If you're interested in receiving a PD hour for your attendance today, you will find a link to the evidence of completion form at the end of the survey. And by early next week, you can find a recording of this webinar on the Redbird Educator Series website. We are hosting 3 additional webinars this fall as well. So on Thursday, September 30th at 4 p.m., we will feature Dr. Antonio Casavarano, from the Department of Special Education, in a webinar titled Writers Workshop Supporting Differentiated Instruction in the K-5 Classroom. On Wednesday, October 27th at 4 p.m., you can learn with Dr. Christy Angleton from the School of Teaching and Learning in a webinar titled Learning to Linger, What Picture Book Design Can Teach Teachers About Lingering in Text with Children. And on Wednesday, November 3rd at 4 p.m., we will feature Dr. Grace King and Dr. Sonia Klein from the School of Teaching and Learning and their webinar titled Towards a Critical Approach, a Tool to Analyze and Transform Writing Pedagogy. You can find descriptions of each webinar and register to attend on our website. So again, thank you for spending your time with us today, and take care, and we hope to see you again soon.